Hello and welcome to Japan Lyric Room. In this program, we explore the lyrics of Japanese songs, delivering clear explanations of their meanings and unique cultural backgrounds.
Please note that while the voices and illustrations in this video are AI-generated, the project itself is run by two Japanese creators living in Japan. The script is carefully researched and written by us to provide original explanations.
So imagine being 16 years old.
Yeah.
You're completely unknown to the public.
Right.
And your very first time, stepping behind a microphone involves delivering this incredibly cold, surgical dissection of a dead relationship.
Yeah, it's pretty intense for a teenager.
Right. Today, we are exploring the lyrics of the monumental 1978 pop masterpiece, listening to Olivia.
Or Olivia O Kikinagara in Japanese.
By the artist Anri. I've been really looking forward to this one because, it's just such a sweeping, mature ballad.
It really is.
It paints this incredibly vivid picture of a woman who has she's just ended a relationship. And she's sitting all alone in her room, listening to Western music, and meticulously organizing her feelings.
Yeah, it's a landmark track, both musically and culturally.
Definitely.
But before we actually get into the lyrical construction, I think we have to establish the context of 1978 Japan.
Oh, absolutely.
And specifically, the rather unconventional backstory of how this song was born. It's a fascinating narrative of chance and timing.
The timeline of her debut is what really caught my attention when I was looking through the research.
Yeah.
Because Anri wasn't some, polished child star who had been in the entertainment industry for years, right?
Oh, no, not at all.
In 1978, she was just a normal 16-year-old high school girl who was, completely obsessed with playing tennis.
That's correct. Yeah, she had zero formal footprint in the industry.
Wow.
However, she possessed a very striking 168-centimeter model-like figure and this tremendous hidden musical talent.
Right.
And the way she was discovered was entirely accidental.
Which is crazy to think about.
It really is. A television executive who just happened to be an acquaintance of her family visited her home for a completely unrelated reason.
Okay.
And while he was there, he just happened to see her playing the piano and heard her sing.
See, that sounds almost like a fabricated industry myth, like a PR story.
Right, but it actually happened.
Wow.
He was immediately struck by her natural vocal ability, so he secretly submitted a demo tape of her singing to record companies.
Just totally behind the scenes.
Yeah, to production agencies too, and that led to an immediate, almost overnight debut.
I'm just trying to put myself in her shoes,
Yeah.
You're 16, you're just playing tennis, and suddenly you were rushed into a recording studio.
It's a lot.
That is an immense amount of pressure for a teenager. How did they even figure out what kind of song she should sing?
Well, that task fell to the songwriter, Ami Ozaki.
Okay.
Ozaki knew she needed to draw out the authentic character of this, young, inexperienced singer.
Right, you can't just force a persona on her.
Exactly. So she decided to bypass the traditional kind of sterile studio meetings.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah, she wanted to connect with Anri on a personal level, so she invited the teenage Anri to her new home in Shirokanadai for a home-cooked meal.
Now, I saw that location mentioned in the notes. Shirokanadai. Why is the fact that it was there significant?
Well, it tells us a lot about the songwriter's mindset at that exact time.
Okay.
Ami Ozaki had recently moved out of a rented room in a much busier, perhaps more chaotic area.
Like where?
The Moraizaka area of Roppongi.
Ah, got it.
So moving to Shirokanadai, which is a very upscale, quiet, and mature neighborhood, was a deliberate step toward independence for her.
Right, that makes sense.
She was setting up her own space, establishing herself as a, self-reliant adult woman.
So you have this songwriter who is actively embracing her own independence, hosting a dinner for this 16-year-old girl who is on the precipice of a massive life change.
Exactly. And during that dinner, as they were just chatting, Anri casually mentioned, she said, "I like listening to Olivia Newton-John."
Just a completely passing comment from a teenager about her musical tastes.
Literally just a throwaway comment. But for a writer like Ami Ozaki, that single comment was the spark.
Wow.
She took that innocent, very real detail and built an entire lyrical universe around it.
That is so cool.
And the result was groundbreaking because of the thematic framing.
Right, groundbreaking because of who was doing the breaking up, right?
Yes, exactly.
Because looking at the landscape of Japanese pop music in 1978, You didn't often hear a woman coldly and actively dumping a man.
No, the prevailing trend in popular music, which was often referred to as kaiokyoku at the time,
Right.
it featured women in a much more passive or lamenting role.
Ah, I see.
They were usually waiting for a man or crying over a man who left or, suffering through some tragic romance.
Yeah, the typical heartbreak tropes.
Right. So to write a song where a woman is the one drawing the boundary and walking away was quite rare.
And to hand that empowering, mature message to a 16-year-old debut singer seems incredibly risky.
It was a huge risk, but Ozaki saw a unique duality in Anri.
What do you mean?
Well, she had this innocent smile, but she also carried an aura that was far more mature than her age suggested.
Oh, I get it.
That gave Ozaki the confidence to write a protagonist who was strong and independent.
Yeah.
In a way, Ozaki infused her own feelings of newfound self-reliance from her move to Shirikanedai directly into the song's protagonist.
That makes a lot of sense. And, the protagonist's physical space in the song feels just as important as her emotional state.
Absolutely.
Let's actually trace the arc of her evening by looking at the lyrics directly. We'll go through the 7 key phrases.
Sounds good. Let's start with the first one.
Right, so the opening line immediately establishes this private sanctuary. I'll read a direct translation and then share the exact cultural nuance. Okay, so the song begins with, the direct translation is, I try listening alone to my favorite song because Olivia comforts my lonely heart.
Yeah.
And here is the exact cultural nuance. I quietly play one of my favorite songs. Olivia's voice soothes my heart.
The crucial element to examine here is the Japanese auxiliary verb attached to the act of listening.
Oh, the teimiru part.
Yes, teimiru.
Which usually indicates trying something out to see what happens, right?
Precisely. In this context, it implies a quiet, active attempt to check her own emotional state.
Oh, wow.
She isn't just turning on the radio for background noise while she cleans her room.
Right.
The act of selecting the record, putting it on, and listening alone is transformed into a delicate ritual.
That's a great way to put it.
She is intentionally using the music to gauge how much she is hurting and to begin the process of self-care.
And she explicitly names Olivia. And Olivia Newton-John was a massive cultural phenomenon in Japan during the late 70s.
Huge. Absolutely huge.
So grounding the lyric in that specific reality, taking Anri's actual teenage habit and putting it in the song, it just brings absolute authenticity to the scene.
It really does.
It doesn't feel like a vague poetic fantasy. It feels like a real person retreating into her bedroom to heal.
That authenticity extends to the physical environment she creates for herself, which we see in the very next line.
Right, the second phrase.
She's complementing the auditory comfort of the music with something tactile.
Which brings us to what she's drinking.
Yes.
The direct translation is, Jasmine tea is a medicine that invites sleep.
Yeah.
And the exact cultural nuance here is, jasmine tea is a gentle medicine that naturally invites me into sleep.
To a modern listener, brewing a cup of jasmine tea might seem totally mundane.
Sure, you can get it anywhere now.
Right, but we have to place this in the context of 1978 Japan.
Oh, right. Was it different then?
Very. At that time, Chinese teas, like jasmine tea, were not common household items at all.
So you wouldn't just open a standard kitchen cabinet and find a box of it sitting next to the green tea?
Not at all. It was considered an exotic, trendy item.
Really?
Yeah, it functioned as a symbol of a sophisticated, modern lifestyle, particularly for young women who were tapped into the latest cultural shifts.
Oh, that's fascinating.
By having the protagonist drink jasmine tea, Ami Ozaki is signaling a very specific type of independent, stylish woman.
It reminds me of how someone today might, meticulously brew a highly specialized artisanal adaptogen drink to wind down.
Yes, exactly like that.
It's a deliberate lifestyle choice.
Oh.
I'm also struck by her use of the word medicine here. She clearly isn't talking about, like, a pharmaceutical sleep aid.
No, it's a psychological medicine.
Right.
She is actively utilizing this exotic, fragrant tea as a tool to untangle the tension of a sleepless night.
Yeah, she's taking charge of her space.
By controlling her environment, the music she listens to, the specific tea she brews, she is regaining control of her own internal rhythm after the chaos of the relationship.
That environment allows her to finally think clearly. And as she sits in that carefully constructed safe space, her thoughts turn to the relationship itself.
Which brings us to the third phrase.
Yes, and this is where the songwriting gets incredibly clever.
I love this part.
The direct translation is, making good things better. No, it's over. We just piled up time.
Yeah.
And the exact cultural nuance is, it is far too late to talk about making things better. All we had been doing was piling things up.
This is just a brilliant use of intertextuality.
Yeah, explain that, because it's not just a random English phrase, right?
No, not at all. The phrase making good things better isn't just a generic lyric. It is a direct reference to Olivia Newton-John's actual 1977 song of the same name.
Making a good thing better. I went back and listened to that Olivia track, and it is a very upbeat, optimistic song.
Very much so.
It's all about deepening love and working on a relationship.
Right, so picture the scene. The protagonist is sitting alone, listening to this intensely positive romantic message from her favorite artist.
And she simply rejects the premise entirely.
Exactly. She coldly responds to the song itself. No, it's over.
It's such a striking juxtaposition.
It really is.
But what I find really fascinating is the specific wording in the Japanese translation. She pluralizes it to good things.
Yes, that linguistic choice changes the entire tone of her reflection.
How so?
By acknowledging good things, she is admitting that the relationship wasn't entirely a nightmare.
Oh, I see.
There were past happy memories, there were good times between them.
But the way she dismisses them immediately after is brutal.
It really is.
She says all they did was pile up time. Just a sheer accumulation of days with no actual substance or growth.
Yeah.
They just let time pass out of pure inertia.
It's a deeply sober self-analysis. She isn't throwing things against the wall or crying uncontrollably.
Right? She's calm.
She recognizes that simply existing in the same space as someone for a long time doesn't equal a thriving relationship.
Wow, yeah.
And that realization forces her to analyze exactly what the dynamic between them actually was.
Right, which leads to the fourth phrase, which is this devastating psychological breakdown of her partner.
Yes, let's hear it.
The direct translation is, exhausted you, loved an illusion of me.
Right.
And the exact cultural nuance here is, you, who have become completely exhausted by reality, were merely loving an illusion of me that projected your own ideals.
This line identifies the fundamental fracture in the relationship.
It's the psychological core of the song, right?
Absolutely. She describes him as being exhausted by reality. The implication is that this man has been drained by external society. Yeah, perhaps the crushing pressures of corporate work, or just the heavy expectations of the outside world.
So when he came home to her, he wasn't looking for an equal partner to share his life with.
No.
He just wanted a convenient, idealized woman to heal him.
Exactly. He wasn't seeing her complex reality. He was engaging with a mabaroshi, an illusion or phantom.
Ah, Mabaroshi.
He projected whatever traits he needed onto her so that he could feel better, completely ignoring who she actually was.
The insight there is profound. But what really gets me is the grammar at the end of the sentence.
But no ending.
Yeah, the no ending. Because I would expect a realization this heavy to be delivered with anger or resentment.
But it isn't. The no ending here functions as a quiet statement of an objective fact.
It lacks the heat of an accusation.
Exactly.
She's just stepping back and looking at the mechanics of his behavior. She's not even necessarily blaming him for being tired. She's just observing that his exhaustion made him incapable of loving the real her. It shows an incredible emotional maturity to be able to diagnose a failed relationship without malice.
That emotional maturity is further highlighted when she contrasts her current reality with the memories of how he treated her.
Right, which brings us to the fifth phrase.
Yes, we see this vividly in her reflection on the gifts he gave her.
Let's look at that contrast. The direct translation is, for my birthday, you never forgot the Cattleya. It seems you were a kind person, but it's the end.
Yeah.
And the exact cultural nuance is, he was such a kind person who never forgot to send Cattleya flowers on my birthday, but our relationship ends right here.
To fully grasp this, we have to examine the symbolism of the Cattleya flower within Japanese floral language.
Which is called Hanakotoba, right?
Yes, Hanakotoba. The Cattleya represents an elegant lady, mature charm, and someone who is fascinating.
So these flowers were essentially his expectations delivered in a vase.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
Wow.
The Cattleya was his choice. It symbolizes the elegant, mature illusion that he required her to be to soothe his own exhaustion.
That makes total sense.
Now, contrast that with the jasmine tea we discussed earlier.
Right, the jasmine tea was her choice. It represents her true, unvarnished self.
Exactly. The flower is the pressure of his ideals. The tea is her authentic self-care.
What really stands out linguistically here is the phrase data mitai.
Which means it seems you were.
Yeah. She says it seems he was a kind person for bringing those flowers.
Using that phrasing creates a massive emotional distance.
It really does.
It's almost as if she is observing a stranger or reading a report about someone she used to know. The emotional attachment is entirely severed.
And she finalizes that severance with Koreeda Oshimai. But it is the end.
Yeah.
The rhythm of the Japanese in this section is incredibly decisive. It just cuts the memory off clean.
That's a hard boundary.
But as often happens when one person is ready to move on, the other person hasn't accepted the reality yet.
Oh, definitely.
And that tension literally rings through the room in the 6th phrase.
Yes, let's look at that one.
The direct translation is, a late night phone call, it's you, isn't it? There's nothing to talk about.
Yeah.
And the exact cultural nuance is, the person calling in the middle of the night must be you who still has lingering regrets. However, I have absolutely no words left to exchange with you now.
We really need to remember the physical reality of a phone call in 1978.
Oh, right. Pre-cell phones.
A landline ringing in the middle of the night wasn't something you could easily ignore by flipping your phone face down.
Or just putting it on Do Not Disturb.
Exactly. It was a loud physical intrusion into the quiet space she had so carefully constructed.
It demands an immediate response.
It really does.
But her reaction to that intrusion is what defines her strength. She doesn't pick up the receiver to yell at him.
No.
She doesn't pick it up to seek closure. She just lets it ring.
Her certainty is absolute. She doesn't need to answer to know who is on the other end.
Right. She says, Anata Deisho.
Yeah.
It's you, isn't it?
Yes. She recognizes the pattern of his lingering regrets, but her internal boundary is so secure that she simply states there is nothing to talk about.
It's so powerful.
She flat out refuses to allow his emotional noise to penetrate her sanctuary or consume any more of her time.
It's the ultimate manifestation of the boundary she's been building all evening.
It really is.
And that brings us to the 7th and final lyrical phrase we're examining today, where she lays down the absolute law of her new life.
Yes.
The direct translation is, the love has vanished. Don't ever call me again.
Yeah.
And the exact cultural nuance is, the love that existed between us has vanished. Therefore, never call me ever again.
Let's focus on the grammatical finality of the phrase no yo at the end of the love has vanished.
Ayoaki no yo. It doesn't leave any room for negotiation, does it?
None whatsoever. It serves as an absolute declaration of fact.
Wow.
It systematically rejects any further debate or hope for reconciliation. The love is not fading, it has vanished.
And this is where the genius of the casting really shines. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
Ami Ozaki knew exactly who she was writing this for. Because if an older, cynical, perhaps deeply embittered sinner delivered the line, never call me again, it might sound hateful or malicious.
It could easily sound petty, yeah.
Right. But when a 16-year-old Anri sings it, utilizing that soft, highly transparent voice of hers, the harshness of the words is transformed.
Completely transformed.
It sounds dignified, it sounds beautiful, but utterly resolute. It is the sound of a woman reclaiming total sovereignty over her life.
When we synthesize this entire progression, from the first needle drop on the record player to the ringing phone, it becomes clear that this is not a song about drowning in heartbreak.
No, not at all.
It is a narrative about shedding the exhausting expectations of others. It's about establishing firm boundaries and reclaiming one's true, unvarnished self.
It truly is a masterclass in emotional independence.
It really is.
And looking at the mechanics of how she achieved that independence in this song leaves me with a thought I want to pass on to anyone listening today.
Yeah.
Just consider the technology of 1978 that we've discussed. Having to physically put a vinyl record on to hear music, the deliberate act of brewing loose-leaf tea, the sheer physical willpower required to sit in a quiet room and simply endure the mechanical ringing of a landline without picking it up.
That takes strength.
It does. All of those actions required a very deliberate physical manifestation of boundaries.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So how do we create that same sacred space for emotional independence today?
It's much harder now.
In an era of instant digital blocking, read receipts, and endless algorithmic noise, how do we find our own version of brewing jasmine tea and ignoring the phone?
That's a profound question.
How do we build a boundary that actually requires us to sit with our feelings rather than just swiping them away? It's definitely something to mull over. Thank you so much for listening. We feature various Japanese songs and provide detailed explanations on our website. Please check the link in the description to explore more. If you enjoyed this program, please subscribe to our channel and let us know your thoughts or song requests in the comments. See you next time. This was Japan Lyric Room.